Hi, I'm Cliff Robertson, and I'm pleased to be here to introduce another installment of Hunters in the Sky, a fascinating documentary series about the experiences of fighter pilots in World War II. This particular program is titled Little Friends, Big Friends. The term Big Friends is a reference to the Allied bombers that launched repeated attacks on Germany. And the Little Friends were the fighter planes that were assigned to protect the bombers. Now, in the long run, the bombing raids were highly effective, but initially there was a problem with the strategy. A fighter plane simply did not have sufficient range to stay with the bomber until it reached its target. To make matters worse, bombers could not perform evasive maneuvers. They had to stay on course until their mission was complete. Now let's watch.
January 1943. The Allies unleash a new kind of air war, round-the-clock bombing, aimed at crippling Germany's ability to fight. It is the RAF by night, raining wholesale destruction on German cities. And the U.S. by day, launching precision attacks against industrial and military targets. For American bomber crews, the strategy proves deadly.
The bombers were very vulnerable in daylight bombing.
Clayton Gross, 6 kills, one of hundreds of green American fighter pilots sent to England to protect the bombers on their dangerous daytime missions.
They were given a target deep in enemy territory, and they had to maintain a straight and level course, and the enemy fighters were able to pick and choose the areas where they could attack, and bombers' losses were tremendous.
Remember, our job today is support of bombers. We're to take these bombers into the target and bring them home. Our primary mission is getting there and getting them back.
We were the little friends, the bombers were the big friend.
The job pits Allied fighter pilots against the Luftwaffe's best in aerial combat. It guarantees an early death to hundreds of aviators. Jerry Brown, 5+ kills.
The first time we saw enemy fighters and more flak was about the end of October, and we lost 3 or 4 in our group from being bounced by enemy 109s. That taught us a good lesson as to what we were going to be up against, because there was only about a half a dozen of them, and they tied up a whole group of fighters.
Well, I think generally, everybody in the group was like me, scared to death, of course, to start with.
Bud Mahurin arrives in England with the 56th Fighter Group to fly the massive P-47 Thunderbolt. The pilots affectionately call their fighter the Jug. Others call it the 7-ton milk bottle.
When we first landed our P-47s at a Royal Air Force base, the RAF pilots came out and said, "You guys better go home with those trucks, you'll never survive." And so it was kind of a terrifying experience.
The critical need for fighter escorts is driven home during one of the first daylight raids deep inside Germany. On October the 14th, 1943, a day 8th Bomber Command will remember as Black Thursday. More than 300 American heavy bombers set a course for the critical ball bearing works at Schweinfurt. Allied fighters, unable to match the long range of the bombers, are forced to turn back before reaching the target. For most of the 900-mile round trip, the bombers are on their own. Walter Beckham, 18 kills.
I think on the Schweinfurt raid, about 60 of our bombers were shot down. 10 people in each bomber. So lo and behold, there's 600 people. Almost nobody ever got back to England.
The slaughter at Schweinfurt is as heartening to the Luftwaffe as it is discouraging to the American crusaders for daylight precision bombing. Johannes Mackie Steinhoff, Luftwaffe, 176 kills.
The Americans stopped bombing for 3 weeks. The American Congress debated on whether or not to stop daylight bombing. The Americans had lost 800 personnel. Our belief was we could stop the bombing and bring an end to the pulverization of German cities.
Despite heavy losses, the Americans decide to continue the daylight bombing campaign. The lives of thousands of bomber crews will depend on the skill and courage of the fighter pilots.
When you see them come home shot up, people that you know are injured and whatnot, then the camaraderie comes in. Then you realize that you're really protecting lives and you got a mission to do, and the best thing to do is to do it the best you can.
I was just lucky that they put me into fighters. I would have been frightened to death of flying bombers. My principal job in World War II was to escort 4-engine bombers, B-17s mainly, and Liberators, B-24s. And those poor guys, when they're attacked, about all they can do is pray.
When we saw them coming back, it was quite heart-rending.
Douglas Benham, Royal Air Force, 11+ kills.
These flying fortresses were showing signs of very heavy damage, not being able to keep up with their formation, and straggling back and losing height. We would perhaps send 2 Spitfires to look after each straggler, while the rest of us would stay with the main force.
Occasionally, bomber crews get the chance to thank their escorts in person.
Just last week, one of my boys, speaking of all the Spitfires, came up to me and he said, "Colonel, there's only one thing wrong with the Spitfires." Well, what's that? Well, he said, "They don't fly close enough for me to kiss them."
Drawing on the bitter lessons of Schweinfurt, Allied leaders devise new strategies to protect the bombers. One is the shuttle, with a relief squadron picking up where an earlier one leaves off. So the big friends have different sets of little friends during the round trip. The other is drop tanks, holding additional fuel that allows P-47 Thunderbolts to reach farther into Germany.
And when we start hitting the targets in Germany, that really hurts.
Thunderbolt pilot Francis Gabby Gabreski, 28+ kills.
The P-47 was a good airplane. It was built to give escort. We had a tremendous advantage. The bombers had a tremendous disadvantage, but our advantage turned out to the bombers' advantage because we could shoot down the German airplanes as they were going in to attack the bombers.
And we were about the only long-range fighter group that could take the bombers into the targets that they were attacking at that time. There were about 4 or 5 P-47 fighter groups escorting the bombers, both B-17s and B-24s, and they would take them to the limit of their range, and then we would pick the bombers up after them, escort them to the target, and then bring them back, and then P-47s would then pick them up and bring them home.
Another hot rod, Colonel Francis Gabreski from Pennsylvania, joined the fight. In the same outfit was Indiana's Major Walker McCurran.
With greater numbers and increased range, Americans by the dozens become aces during a period of relentless man-to-man combat. Split-second reflexes determine life or death. This is Gabby Gabreski's gun camera film, the day he shoots down 2 Messerschmitts at very close range, barely avoiding collision. Oil and debris from one of the Messerschmitts splatters his plane. On another mission, Gabreski finds the tables turned.
And I was deep in Germany and saw a 109 go underneath me, and my fuel was running a little bit low. I had to get home. I looked at the 109. I let him go. But he didn't let me go, and he started after me. And just at that moment, I heard an explosion in my cockpit. My rudder was shot away, my boot was torn, and my airplane lost speed. I, in turn, rolled the airplane over as steep as I could to get to a cloud level beneath me, trying to get there before the 109 could finish me off. I was frightened. That night, I didn't sleep very well, thinking of what could have happened that didn't happen.
German fighter pilots face a dual menace. Guns from both the fighter escorts and the heavily armed bombers. Fritz Loskait, Luftwaffe, 68 kills.
Wenn Sie hinter einer Viermotorigen fliegen, das Schießen auf einer...
Think about fighting the four-engine bombers. They had 4 machine guns in the tail, 4 machine guns on top, 4 machine guns on both sides. That's 3 times 4 machine guns, 12 machine guns, all firing at one fighter. Then you've got 3 neighboring aircraft, each with a dozen machine guns. That's 36 guns shooting at you. You don't see anything but tracers.
At the beginning of 1944, American strategic air power becomes awesome. A new aircraft is introduced that will change the outcome of the war, the P-51 Mustang.
We got the P-51 Mustang, which had this extraordinary performance and this enormous range. 8.5 hours we used to fly in that plane.
James Goodson, 15 kills. In a P-51, Goodson leads the first escorted mission over Berlin.
It was a remarkable plane, and of course, being right over Berlin, I think Goering said when he saw our red-nosed Mustangs over Berlin, he knew that the air war was lost for Germany because we could escort the bombers.
As American bombers and fighters carry the air war to the heart of Germany, the Luftwaffe sends fully 2/3 of its fighter force to stop them. In the skies over Germany, the stage is set for bloody conflict. Berlin becomes an inferno. Intense bombing shatters the city, while vicious dogfights rage overhead. Many aces will be born in these battles, and many will die. Jack Ilfrey, 8 kills.
We got jumped by what we estimate a 50 to 60 gaggle of German fighters. I had a real good shot at an Me-109, and he burst into flame. Right at that time, somebody screamed on my radio, said, "Jack, look out. Somebody's right under you trying to ram you." And I thought, oh, no. And my right wing went across the cockpit of that Me-109, tearing off about 4.5 to 5 feet of it. And it knocked out that gas tank for that engine and threw me into a spin. Now that upsets your constitution.
I looked down and I could see the shadow of my airplane, and there was a great long trail of smoke following me. And so I knew something was wrong. And all of a sudden there was an explosion and fire started to come out through the cowling of the engine. And at the same time, the group leader called and said, "Watch it, boy, you're on fire." And as the last word I heard was fire as I was going over the side, and of course went over the side and bailed out.
Even among pilots lucky enough to make it home, the daily struggle for survival takes its toll.
At the end of a mission, whatever, I was always dead tired. I'd get back home and park the airplane, and I'd feel like lying down on the concrete. It's nervous exhaustion. I'm sure it's tension.
Between missions, a rare chance for young fighter pilots to relieve tension and blow off steam. For the Germans, there is no escape.
Hinzu kommt, dass es den
The
Begriff
Americans didn't know what burnt out meant. They flew for a limited period of time, and then they'd return home, whereas our pilots were constantly on duty. A service record of 500 to 600 sorties among those who survived was perfectly normal for us. But the Americans didn't have anything close to that many, not even close.
The winter of 1944 finds Germany reeling under the relentless onslaught of Allied air attacks. Bomber Command presses the advantage, sending armadas of 1,000 bombers and more to crush the German war machine. The Luftwaffe's fighter arm is stretched to the limit, trying to defend the German heartland. Hans-Joachim Jobs, Luftwaffe, 50 kills.
Zu der Zeit lagen keine deutschen Jäger mehr vorne.
At that time in the war, there were no more German fighter aircraft stationed on the Western Front. They had been pulled back to Berlin due to the American daylight bombing raids to protect Berlin against enemy attacks.
German defense increases in ferocity. Losses are heavy on both sides. Daylight raids are harrowing for the 10 men trapped inside a bomber. And the fighter pilots feel deeply for their big friends.
I, as a fighter pilot, seeing those bombers disappear in the clouds of black flak kind of upset me, knowing that there was 10 men on each one of those bombers. And here I am, and a fighter, I can evade and get around, and but they couldn't. They had to stay on their course and drop their bombs.
When I saw big bombers go down, I felt terrible because you knew there were 10 men in each one of those, and we watched a lot of them go down.
By the spring of 1944, the Allies achieve air supremacy. Bombers and fighters in ever-increasing numbers roam over Germany, driving the Luftwaffe to the ground.
Die Amerikaner kreuzten auf.
The Americans would send out as many as 100 or 120 escorts to protect the 4-engine bombers, and we had at most 20 or 30. Very seldom were we equally matched. Usually, they had numerical superiority, and their escort pilots were mainly excellent.
And that's air supremacy, so that there's just no way that those poor bastards could continue to fight. There's just no way. They still had good pilots. They were still producing as many airplanes as they had been, but they were running out of pilots.
Gunther Rau, Luftwaffe, 275 kills.
Der letzte Einsatz mit Feindberührung war eigentlich am 12.
My last mission encountering the enemy was on May 12, 1944. I was engaged with a large American fighter, a Thunderbolt. I was successful at shooting it down. Then I was chased from a height of 8,000 meters. My plane was totally shot up. My thumb was shot off, and I had to get out. This was my last encounter.
General Adolf Galland, Luftwaffe, 104 kills.
Göring so überworfen war über die Einsätze in der
There
Reichsverteidigung.
came a time when Göring was expressing himself about the alleged lack of bravery of German fighter pilots. He cursed the fighter pilots and claimed that they didn't deserve their decorations. So I was very angry. I tore my decoration from my collar and banged it on the table.
By late spring 1944, the Luftwaffe is all but destroyed. The major industrial centers of Germany's heartland lie in ruins.
The worst experience I had was the bombing of my wife's hometown, Magdeburg. I was flying above and knew that my family was down there. Magdeburg was a burning inferno. It was a horrible experience. I saw the destruction of German cities and realized that with this much devastation on the ground, then Germany could never prevail and win the war. I realized that we were fighting only to postpone the end of the war, but a victory was now unthinkable.
Air supremacy is won at heavy cost. 40,000 Allied airmen die in combat over Europe. The big friends and their long-range little friends will continue their furious assault until Hitler's once feared and mighty Third Reich becomes a wasteland.
Hi, I'm Cliff Robertson, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Hunters in the Sky, a fascinating documentary series about the fighter aces of World War II. The aviators featured in this program were not just flyers. In a sense, they were also test pilots. Between 1940 and 1945, engineers on both sides of the conflict developed new aircraft designs at a furious pace. Naturally, the new planes were tested before they were released for military use. But it was during actual battles that a plane's strengths and weaknesses were clarified. The race to develop faster, more agile, and more deadly fighter planes continued throughout the war, with each side temporarily gaining advantages over the other. By 1944, Germany had introduced the first jet fighter, the Me-262. Let's watch.
World War II. Spectacular duels are fought in hostile skies. The battle is for control of the air. Another war, an invisible war, is fought behind locked doors of top-secret rooms. Designers and technicians are in a frantic race to develop new equipment to win the edge. Only 30-odd years since man first experienced flight, the fighter plane has become one of the deadliest weapons in the history of combat. It will soon be deadlier still. In the Pacific, reeling from the Japanese attack at Pearl Harbor, America quickly realizes that its fighters are no match for Japan's light, fast Zeros. The U.S. faces a new kind of war, fought from moving aircraft carriers. It will require new techniques and new technologies. The only fighter available to the American pilots in the Pacific in any quantity is the stubby Grumman F-4F Wildcat, Navy pilot Butch Voris flies a Wildcat from the USS Enterprise.
It was a little mid-wing, looked like a elongated barrel. It had 50 caliber machine guns. It was built almost like an iron machine. I think that's why Grumman got the name, the Grumman Iron Works. They built their machines that were rugged, they were tough. They could take the stress of carrier work, and they could take a real pounding or battle damage in the air, and you could still survive.
The Wildcat can kill, but it is no aerobatic match for the lighter, tight-turning Japanese Zero.
The Zero was very easy to control. It didn't accelerate well because of its small engine, but it was very maneuverable, and it had 20mm cannons. This was an advantage. The Zero had weak points, though. They had no defensive armor, and when they were hit, they easily caught fire.
For all its limitations, the Wildcat is a heavily armored, tough bird to down.
Anyone that flies airplanes knows that the lighter one can maneuver faster than the heavier one. Now, we had them beaten on firepower and armor, and they had us beaten on speed and maneuverability.
If you got tangled up with a Zero at slow speeds, especially a slow climb, they were like a hummingbird. They'd whip around and get on your tail, and you'd buy their lunch.
Captain Ken Walsh is so taken with the Zero's grace that he nearly forgets that it's the enemy.
A Zero came right down in front of me, and for a split second, I couldn't but marvel at the beautiful configuration. First time I ever saw a Zero that close up, and the color was a sort of a tan gold color. It was clean and wax, and but this was a kill, and I lined up my gun sight on him within range, and he went down in flames.
During an attack in 1942 on Dutch Harbor, Alaska, a Zero is forced down intact.
The Americans caught one Zero fighter in Dutch Harbor. They brought it back and studied it. I think then the Americans realized that the armor was very weak. They often shot from the front. When we went behind them, they dove and kept some distance, then attacked from the front. We remodeled the Zero, but we had no real defense against the American fighters, and that was fatal.
Hit and run is the American strategy. Don't dogfight with the nimble Zero. Summer 1942. A new American fighter is operational. The twin-engined, supercharged Lockheed P-38 is the first U.S. fighter to exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight.
The American fighter that surprised me the most was the P-38. It was too fast for us. When it attacked from above, I flew away. It kept turning, and then it attacked again. I did not expect the P-38 to be able to move so fast.
The P-38 is joined by the Vought F-4U Corsair, nicknamed Hose Nose by the Americans, whistling death by the Japanese.
With this fighter, with that engine, we could break 400 miles an hour in straight and level flight. Beginning February 1943, we were deployed with the Corsair to take the offensive. This is where the tide turned.
Another deadly fighter, the F-6F Hellcat, joins the U.S. arsenal. Powerful, fast, long-ranged, a match for the agile Zero in a go-for-broke shootout.
The F-6F Hellcats appeared in 1943. I felt they were better than our Zeros. When we used to attack the older F-4s, they flew away. They avoided the Zeros. But the Hellcats were so good that even if they were at a disadvantage, they still attacked us.
Now, the F-6F Hellcat was a tremendous fighting machine. It had 6 50 calibers. It was responsible, I believe the number was 75 or 76% of all aircraft shot down in the Pacific during World War II. So it was the mainstay of our fighter machine.
U.S. factories turn out swarms of new planes. New pilots wait to fly them in combat. In contrast, continual bombing depletes Japan's capability in the air. Shortages of raw materials and fuel plague efforts to reinforce beleaguered island garrisons.
During the battles in the South Pacific, many skillful pilots died. I think around that time, Japan started becoming inferior to the enemy, and the shortage of aircraft on the Japanese side accelerated the change in the tide.
Japanese aces lead attack after attack, and they are the first to die. Novice pilots rushed into battle are no match for American veterans. Desperate young pilots channel frustrated courage into suicidal missions. An ancient Japanese tradition is reborn. The kamikaze, or divine wind, is the phrase for the fighter who trades death for a flare of glory. The war in the Pacific will go on, but for Japan, it is a struggle without hope. The U.S. wins the war of technology as her production overwhelms Japanese resistance. In Europe, the struggle for air supremacy begins in 1940 over Great Britain. German technology has perfected the sleek, powerful Me-109, a design proven in the skies over Spain, Poland, and France. Friedrich Oeblisser, Luftwaffe, will score 127 kills in his Me-109.
For me as a fighter pilot, the Me-109 was the plane. I flew many versions of it. We used this plane a great deal, and those that did fly it considered it to be the best plane of its kind.
Britain's Royal Air Force, vastly outnumbered, pins its slim hope on a fighter evolved from a racing seaplane and developed despite an obstinate bureaucracy, the Vickers Supermarine Spitfire.
The Spitfire has a classically beautiful shape, and everybody wanted to fly Spitfires in 1940. They looked marvelous. The Spitfire was a few miles an hour faster than a 109.
The RAF's other mainstay is the Hurricane, tough, dependable, and deadly. But it is the Spitfire that gives the Luftwaffe its worst headache, matching the performance of the 109. Though slightly faster, the Spitfire's Rolls-Royce Merlin engine is not fuel-injected, like the Daimler-Benz engined Me-109. This technical edge gives the Germans an early advantage in combat, where gravity forces, commonly known as G-forces, cut off the flow of fuel to a normally carbureted engine. For RAF pilots, that tiny edge is the difference between life and death.
When we started the war, if you got behind a 109, his best maneuver to get away from you, shove the stick forward and do that. Whereas we had to roll over. We couldn't take negative G in our Rolls engines.
The solution, a plate over the Merlin's carburetor to keep the fuel flow constant. America provides the RAF with 100-octane aviation fuel. By comparison, the Germans must supplement their meager supplies with synthetic fuels that limit engine performance. In spite of this, German research again tips the balance. The Focke-Wulf 190, with a 1,700 horsepower engine built by BMW, can outperform the Spitfire.
I remember when I first ran into a Focke-Wulf. I was jolly lucky to get home.
Harry Broadhurst reports his encounter with a new Luftwaffe fighter. Eyebrows are raised. Command doesn't believe his story about a German fighter that can outperform the Spitfire.
Unfortunately, one of the chaps flying a Focke-Wulf landed in England. We got a complete Focke-Wulf, and we were able to test it.
The Focke-Wulf challenge is met when Rolls-Royce introduces superchargers that make Merlin engines the equal of German technology. The Spitfire's combat ceiling is doubled from 15 to 29,000 feet. As America enters the air war over Europe, U.S. pilots are provided with the P-38, already proven in the Pacific and North Africa. It has the firepower and performance to take on the Luftwaffe, but its range is limited. Early 1943 sees the arrival of the P-47 Thunderbolt, called the Jug by her pilots. Massive, powerful, and well-armed, this fighter can reach the frontiers of the Reich. The Thunderbolts prove their worth. However, they still cannot provide bomber escort deep inside Germany. A long-range fighter must be found quickly. American designers produced the P-51 Mustang, powered by the British Merlin engine. it is an incredible fighting machine. Equipped with drop tanks, the P-51 has a remarkable duration in the air of 8 hours. In March 1944, the first Mustangs appear over Berlin. Allied bombers now have the protection they need.
I had a lot of respect for the Mustang. Its performance, armament, and equipment were superior to ours. They had better sighting equipment. Their sights could automatically compensate for our movements. In high-speed dives, they'd fly through our formation and still be able to pull out at low altitude, thanks to their high-performance engines. We really had to look out for those Mustangs. They had the best scores against us. If I remember correctly, one of the best American pilots scored 20 kills with the Mustang he flew.
It is the Mustang with its combination of firepower, speed, and range that assures Allied domination of the skies over Europe. Mustangs alone will account for almost 5,000 combat kills. Technology and production breakthroughs unite. The Allies grow more powerful. The Luftwaffe learns that courage and skill are not enough to stem the massive Allied buildup. Germany will make one last attempt to win the Battle of the Blueprint. A revolutionary new fighter is on the drawing board, the Me-262, the first combat jet. Long-range Mustang fighters and Allied bombers by the thousands rain destruction on Germany. The Luftwaffe is ordered to consolidate its remaining fighters to defend the fatherland, but the raids cannot be stopped.
We as pilots were experiencing great gloom. We had only one thought: when will we get a better fighter so we can stop the bombers? The fact of the matter was that the only way to counteract the absolute superiority in sheer numbers that the Allies possessed was a technical superiority.
The Germans turned to a new technology, the jet fighter. Professor Willy Messerschmitt's top-secret project, the Me-262, a twin-engine turbojet fighter whose performance will eclipse anything in the sky. Incredibly, the brilliant design has been on the drawing board for 4 years before it is seen as urgent.
By May 1943, I was able to fly the first jet fighter. This was a prototype. This was something completely new for me, and it was a really grandiose experience. This was the beginning of a completely new age, a new generation of aircraft, and a new technology.
The Me-262, the fastest plane yet flown by man, is presented to Adolf Hitler. Germany will have an unbeatable fighter, but Hitler issues an astonishing order.
I was present in 1944, before the invasion, when Hitler was shown the Messerschmitt 262 at Innsbruck in East Prussia. It was very impressive, achieving about 510 miles per hour in level flight. Then Hitler asked Messerschmitt, "Can this plane carry bombs?" He answered, "Yes, mein Führer, a 500-pound bomb." "Good," Hitler said. "Then this is the Blitz bomber with which I will beat back the invasion." Then a struggle began to try to use this aircraft as a fighter, where it had enormous potential, instead of a bomber, for which it wasn't at all suited.
Hitler's decision to limit the use of the new jet is one of the costliest in the history of war. The Me-262 fails as a bomber. In the last desperate months of the Third Reich, Hitler agrees to use the plane as a fighter. Galland is ordered to create an elite interceptor squadron. He turns to Johannes Steinhoff.
Galland turned to me and asked, "Would you like to form a jet fighter squadron? Tomorrow morning, then." I went to Brandenburg and formed the squadron. We got the planes from Bavaria and assembled them, and we began to fly them. This was flying in a new dimension. It was fabulous.
Walter Krupinski is one of the aces chosen by Steinhoff to fly the jets in combat.
Der Oberst Steinhoff, und der stand also auf der Fläche.
Colonel Steinhoff stood on the wing and said to me, "She flies just like any other bird, except it takes forever until you're up to speed, and you need just as long to lose speed when you want to land." That was all the instruction I had. I taxied over to the runway and took off. You had the feeling that the gods were shoving you skywards.
Germany's first jet fighter squadron is airborne. Allied pilots are in for a shock.
And this jet came down through our formation, and that's the first jet I'd ever seen in my life.
I flew right at them and wanted to shoot, but our closure rate was too high. I flew right through the formation without firing.
I saw this thing go by. It just went dashing through the formation, didn't even fire its guns. We couldn't do any combat with them because they were here and gone.
Also ein Vorteil.
The high rate of closing speed was an advantage, but it was also a disadvantage because you closed on the formation so quickly that you only had a couple of seconds in which you were able to fire.
Das Flugzeug war hervorragend.
The plane was superbly armed. By the end of the war, we had 12 rockets on each wing. You had to fly close to the bomber so that at 1,000 meters you were sure that the 24 rockets would cover the entire length of the bomber. When the rockets were fired, the bomber was destroyed.
Although jets begin to take their toll of Allied bombers, only about 20 or 30 of the 1,400 jets produced are operational at any one time. Severe fuel shortages keep many of them grounded. Allied fighter pilots must hunt the nests of the new menace.
When the jets and rocket planes turned up, they went 500 or more miles an hour. We realized the only way we could catch them was on the ground.
Wenn wir starteten mit der 262,
From takeoff, it took the 262 almost 5 minutes to reach battle speed. American fighters would keep a lookout over the airfields and take advantage of this vulnerable moment when they knew they could get us.
We found an airfield with 2 jets on it, and I went down to take them out. We were very worried because we thought they could produce these planes very fast, and there was no way we escorting fighters could catch them.
The astonishing new technology, though a serious threat to the Allies, is a classic case of too little, too late. Even as German resistance collapses, General Galland's squadron fights to the end.
das waren nicht die schlechtesten, es waren
These were selected pilots, and they fought to the last day, until we destroyed our own planes, the Messerschmitt 262s. We blew them up in front of the American tanks. We didn't do this to win the war, or to gain better conditions for peace, or negotiate positions. No, we fought because we did have a superior weapon. Yes, we were faced with greater numbers, but we could still hold our own. We could not surrender before the German people while we still had these superior planes. This is the reason why this unit perished in flames.
Out of the carnage of war, a new technology is given life. Jet aviation takes flight across a new horizon, and other horizons wait to be conquered. To fly higher, faster, farther is the goal. The prize, new means to challenge the limits of human endeavor.